On October 15, 1635, nearly 60 men, women, and children set out from Massachusetts, accompanied by their horses, cattle, and pigs. Their destination was the valley of the Connecticut River, a land that had no name beyond the wilderness beyond the forest. Before them stretched an endless expanse of untamed country, covered with swamps and rivers, mountains and hills, where bears, wolves, and mountain lions lurked beneath the shadows of ancient trees. No reliable map of the route existed, only rumors of the valley's fertility and the faint traces left by earlier scouts urged them onward. A journey that today would take only a few hours required nearly 2 weeks in those days. Women and children, the old and the young alike, made their way step by step through marshes, forded rivers, climbed mountains, and drove their herds before them. Some rode on horseback, the elderly and the infirm traveled in wooden carts. Most, however, completed the entire journey on foot. At night, frail, elderly women slept beneath the forest trees, sheltered by nothing more than branches overhead and the vault of the sky. Many of them had been raised in the comfort of English manor houses and had never before endured such hardship. Winter arrived earlier than anyone expected. By November 15, the Connecticut River had frozen solid, and snowfall was so heavy that a large portion of the livestock driven from Massachusetts never managed to cross the river. The settlers had scarcely enough time to build cabins or shelters for themselves and their animals. That winter brought human and animal suffering alike to its very height. Transporting food and household goods across a trackless wilderness proved nearly impossible. Most of their provisions and belongings had been loaded onto a handful of small vessels to be carried by sea, but the storms of the season were merciless. 2 cargo boats sailing from Boston to Connecticut sank near Brown's Island, taking with them not only their entire cargo, but also their crews. Another vessel, carrying 6 Connecticut settlers bound for Boston, was caught in a violent storm in another bay in mid-November. Its passengers barely managed to reach shore and then wandered for 10 days through deep snow and bitter weather without encountering another soul before finally arriving at Plymouth, exhausted and barely alive. By late November and early December, the settlements along the river had exhausted their food supplies. Famine and death were plainly visible in the faces of the people. Driven by hunger, some resolved to undertake the desperate journey back to Massachusetts on foot in the heart of winter. Of the 13 who attempted it, 1 fell through the ice while crossing a river and drowned. The remaining 12 spent 10 days on the trail, and without the assistance of native people, none of them would have survived. Conditions became so desperate that on December 3rd and 4th, many of the newcomers abandoned their half-finished homes. 70 men, women, and children made their way through the bitter cold to the mouth of the river, hoping to find the long-awaited supply ships there. The ships had not arrived. Instead, they all boarded the Rebecca, a small vessel that itself had been trapped in the river ice 20 miles upstream only 2 days earlier. A gentle rain and a favorable tide broke the ice sufficiently for the ship to free itself. Even then, it ran aground on a sandbar, forcing the passengers to unload its cargo before it could continue. At last, after 5 days, the vessel reached Boston. Had this chain of fortunate events not occurred, all 70 passengers would almost certainly have perished from starvation. Those who remained beside the river suffered no less. Sustained by hunting and by the assistance of native communities, they survived on acorns, malt, and raw grain. Livestock that failed to cross the river before it froze spent the entire winter in forests and meadows without human care, and remarkably, they fared better than many of the animals that had been carefully driven across the river. Even so, great numbers of livestock perished, and the people of Dorchester and Windsor alone suffered losses estimated at nearly £200 sterling. The fear and sorrow that engulfed these settlers are difficult to describe. They found themselves surrounded by a vast and terrifying wilderness. Among the native tribes were both friends who came to their aid and others whose hostility filled the settlers with constant dread. At every moment, they feared attacks that might destroy their families. They had neither bread for themselves nor for their children, neither adequate shelter nor sufficient clothing. By land and by sea alike, every avenue of relief seemed closed. Yet what stands out in the surviving letters and journals of those first settlers is this: scarcely a complaint is ever heard from the women. They recounted only their hardships, the dangers they had endured, and the trials they had borne, and nothing more. No lament, no protest against the harshness of their fate. They carried pain, grief, and deprivation in silence, fixing their eyes on a future they knew they themselves would build with their own hands. Homes in the heart of the wilderness for generations yet to come. Generations who would one day remember their names with gratitude and blessing. What are now the thriving towns and prosperous communities along the banks of the Connecticut River owe their origins to that terrible winter and to the quiet, steadfast courage of those women.